Hey everybody, this is Jim from Top Jimi Profiles. Today we're going to demo the Top Jimi Sabbath pack for the Kemper Profiler. Time to make some noise.
Gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh Lord, yeah.
For their early albums with Ozzie, Tony used a Laney setup just like this one. This is a 1970 Laney head, non-master volume. It's basically very similar to a Marshall Super Lead. It's got the same tone stack. One difference is that it's got bass and treble channels. Tony always used the bass channel, left input, and he dimed all the tone controls and the gain except for the bass on 0. To drive the amp, he used I believe it was a Dallas Arbiter at the time, Rangemaster. This is a reissue Rangemaster treble booster. These were very popular back in the day, and still are. He had a specially modified one, and it got literally thrown away like 1980. Nobody knows what was done to it. So I just used a stock Rangemaster and it seemed to do just fine. For speakers, 1970 25 watt greenback with pulsonic cones. Very important, they sound better. And at some point he switched to the G12H30, the higher wattage 30 watt greenbacks. Eventually figured out that on the third album he changed to those G12H30s. I could not figure out the tone. I couldn't get it with the 25s, switched to the 30s. That almost got me there, and I could not figure out the rest. How do you get that tone? Well, he actually took the bass and dimed it on that album. If you read on the internet, the bass is always at 0. Don't always believe what you read on the internet. Moving ahead to 1980, it's Marshall time. Everybody who knows me knows I love me some modded Marshalls. So Tony in 1980 had a guy modify a Marshall Super Lead or two. It's coincidentally the same guy who threw out his Rangemaster, literally threw it in the garbage. Said it was junk. And so this is the Lee Jackson Paul Gilbert Marshall. I've got a few modded Marshalls, but I chose this one because the tone stack is still Marshall. It didn't get modified very much. It still sounds like a Marshall, just with more gain. So does that mean my Iommi sounds are going to sound like Racer X? No. This is actually a surprisingly versatile amp. And it sounds pretty good. I had a lot of fun profiling this rig into G12H 30 speakers. On the second album with Ronnie James Dio, he used the same Marshall rig, and on one particular song called Voodoo, he's got a very distinct tone where he engages the wah, and then if you set it at just the right spot and leave it, you can get this very nasally tone, which is pretty cool. So we made a profile of that tone. So Tony has used P90s or P90 derivative pickups almost exclusively for his whole career. So for the profiling, I used my reference P90 guitar, and this is a 1957 Les Paul Special. This is an original, not a reissue. So it's got the 1950s P90s in it. And for the demo, I also broke out this guitar. This is a 1959 Les Paul Jr. I shouldn't own this guitar, and I tried to sell it, but because I don't have a definite need for it, but I love it. So I tried to sell it, I couldn't do it, and I'm keeping it, and I'm not ashamed. So this is also in the demo. In the later part of the 80s, Tony began experimenting with some other amplifiers, including Mesa Boogies. And on the 92 reunion album with Ronnie James Dio, it certainly sounds like he was using a Mesa. At least on my favorite song from that album called I. So for this profile, we used a Mesa Boogie Mark V, which would be sitting right here, but I don't have the amp with me. So just imagine. And it's in Mesa 2C Plus mode through a G12H30. So in around 93, Laney came out with a Tony Iommi signature amp, the GH100 Ti, which is based off their GH series amplifiers. This is a really nice sounding amp. It's very easy to get a good tone out of this thing. It's got plenty of gain. It's not a big mid-scooped sound, which Tony rarely uses a mid-scoop sound. There's plenty of mids there, and this does that just fine. So we paired this up with the G12H30 and good tones. So he used this from 93 up until almost the present day. So I'm going to skip ahead to 2013 on their reunion album with Ozzie called 13. And so we used this with the G12H30. So in 2009, Tony and friends reunited with Ronnie James Dio and called their band Heaven and Hell. And they did an album that year, and for that album, Tony used an Engel Powerball amplifier, which I don't have with me, but if it was here, it would be sitting here growling at you. The tone on that album, I think, is the most evil Iommi tone he ever got. I love it. And I can't play an Iommi riff through this profile without making heavy metal faces. So I challenge you to not make a heavy metal face when you're jamming this profile.
The next one says, I wish that you were dead. Don't go out, put it back, no reading from the Bible.
If you're counting at home, you probably noticed that this pack required 5 different rigs. It took forever. And haven't tried to include all of his tones. I mean, his career has been almost 50 years now, and there's tons of tones. We couldn't do them all, so we tried to hit the highlights. So I think if you get the pack, you'll be well on your way to jamming some pretty cool Sabbath tone. So as always, everything you've heard in this demo was made using the Kemper, only the Kemper and nothing but the Kemper. And there's nothing added afterwards, no funny business, no EQ or anything like that. So if you buy the profile pack, this is what you will sound like. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe and we'll see you next time.